It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And yes, we are talking media gaslighting today. I know people are sick of the term gaslighting, but fucking Amber Heard's back in the news. Or she was last week. With the appeal and this weird messed up theory that a juror wasn't the right person anyway. I read some media stories and I still see well-meaning people doing this thing of still believe women should be able to be sued for defamation for saying they were victims of sexual violence. Like, well, yes, I do, if they're not telling the truth. They're not being sued for telling their real experiences. They're being sued, allegedly, because the guy says it didn't happen. Now, if a guy is abusive, he's going to take every tool he possibly can to abuse. If a woman is abusive, she's going to take every tool she can to abuse. And one of those tools is gaslighting. And I'm going to talk about how the media is complicit in mass gaslighting and how that doesn't actually help victims of abuse, survivors of abuse, so people who experience abuse. It actually makes it worse. So if you like this sort of content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Okay, I did that super fast. Coffee's kicking in. So it really seems that people have a different opinion of Amber Heard if they watched the trial versus if they didn't. If they just looked at social media or they just looked at media, she seems like a victim who's being railroaded. If you actually watch the trial, there's the pledge versus donated moment. And the reason I think so many people reacted to that is the pledge versus donate moment. For people who aren't aware, on cross-examination, Johnny Depp's lawyer, I believe it was Camille Vasquez, pointed out that most people do not use pledge and donate interchangeably. Pledge means pledge, donate means donate. And Amber Heard tried to convince the jury and the world that when she said donated, she meant pledged. Most people do not buy this because most people believe their eyes and ears, not her. But gaslighting is the art of don't believe your eyes and ears, believe me. Doubt your own common sense, doubt your own instincts because you don't know what you're talking about. I know, right? And gaslighting is really insidious. And gaslighting is one of the ways that abusive people wear down their targets to prime them for abuse. And I am watching the media facilitate gaslighting in this case, allegedly to protect women who are victims of abuse. That's not the way it works. Because in order to truly protect people from abuse, we need to get better at spotting and combating abusive tactics like gaslighting, not creating these stupid, single gender spaces that are apparently safer, but they're really not. If you look at, the rate of domestic violence in, say, same-sex partnerships, right? Yeah. Of which Amber Heard was also accused by an airport security guard who was also a lesbian, but Amber Heard claimed homophobia. Gaslighting, right? I mean, the idea that we are supposed to accept that she truly believes pledge means donates, or donate means pledged. These aren't, $1 million words like problematic versus problem, right? These aren't understandable malapropisms that people get wrong all the time. You know, using the wrong accept versus accept. You know, using the wrong there, something like that. This isn't a common mistake. This is, oh, come on territory. And while often people are probably a little too judgmental and too knee-jerk judgmental, in some cases, I mean, it is the job of a jury to judge. And the whole jury system is not perfect. Juries get it wrong. But I think we use the reasonable person standard here. A reasonable person is, oh, come on. Pledge does not mean donate. You know, this isn't something like sexual orientation versus sexual preference, that different people use them different ways, right? Some people use sexual preference as a euphemism for sexual orientation. Older people in more conservative circles. Other people like myself use sexual preference as separate from sexual orientation because, you know, you have a type beyond plumbing, right? We just know this is so. But I actually got gaslit about that when Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed, and I was trying to explain why people had a knee-jerk emotional reaction to her saying sexual preference as somebody who leans conservative, right? Because there was a time where sexual preference was dog whistle language when they were trying to make being gay a behavior that was a choice as opposed to an identity which you couldn't help. We now know you can't help who you're attracted to, but they use sexual preference to suggest, oh, this is a deviant urge that you can control. You can choose to not act on it. That's the foundation of conversion therapy. And we know that conversion therapy has horribly traumatizing impacts on people who are forced into it or who willingly submit to it, right? But I got accused of being disingenuous. This is why I have a real issue with the phrase clearly implied. Well, you may not have said it, but you clearly implied it. Words mean things. If it's clear, it's not implied. It's not implicit, it's explicit. If it's an implication, then it is by definition not clear. Now, we see clearly implied all over hot take commentary media, right? People take a comment by a politician or a famous person and, oh, well, they said this, but the clear implication was this other thing. There's no such thing as a clear implication. But this is how commonplace, this is how normalized gaslighting is in our public dialogue. And I'm sure you can see why this is a big problem. Sorry, guys, I know I'm putting on skin cream while I'm still lacking allergy medication because I'm recording the same day as Monday's video, so I am itchy right now, so forgive me. But see, I'm not pretending you're not going to notice that. I'm going, yeah, this is a bit weird and kind of an overshare. And yes, some people do lack self-awareness. Some people aren't aware of how they're coming across. Some people don't understand that, yeah, maybe they need to examine ideas more. But that's not the same as somebody suggesting that they know what's in your head better than you do. You know, I feel the same way about implicit bias, quite frankly. Bias is based on cognition, right? You may be unaware of your bias, but there's nothing implicit about it. It's, if you dig deep down, if you're favoring one group of people over another group of people, that's bias, and everybody has a bias. It's so weird because when I did, media training and journalism stuff, we were taught everyone has a bias. It's essential that you understand yours so it doesn't unduly impact your writing. We never said, oh, this is implicit, you don't know. It's No, everybody has one. Find out yours. And now we have this implicit bias training, which more and more shows it doesn't work and may actually make people more hesitant around black and brown people, because now they're like, oh my God, am I secretly racist? Let's treat them completely differently so they don't feel singled out. Right? This is why it's very important for words to have meanings, right? There's no shortcut to really listening to a person and treating them like another human being who may be different from you, but equally valid, right? It takes a while to know whether someone is a bad person or not. You don't know just from looking at somebody whether they're a bad person. However, the media loves to play these easy heroes and villains. The media is not recognizing that there's a lot of abusive behavior in media, especially big, like mass media. There's a lot of narcissists. There's a lot of sociopaths. Trust me, I worked there. Abusive behavior becomes extremely normalized. And one of the abusive behaviors that's been normalized is this sort of right think, wrong think dynamic that we've got here. If it's your side, well, okay, conservatives are better at this than liberals, which is why they're winning right now. But if it's your side, defend them to the hilt. Nothing they do is wrong. No, it's a smear, it's attack, it's attack. But if it's the other side, the slightest little thing, they're coming for your children. The left likes to eat its own, which is, you know, why we end up losing people like Gina Carano to the Daily Wire. And, you know, everybody attacks centrists because that's not picking a side. That's bullshit. There's no, it's funny because I see many of the same people who complain about the two-party system in the US also attacking centrists. Which is it, guys? But this is why it's really important to protect your judgment, protect your critical thinking skills against the mass gaslighting that we are exposed to every day the minute we engage with the world, right? It's really hard to completely avoid media. It's very hard to avoid the impacts of media, because even if you don't directly engage, you know, we had an instance where a really good friend of ours believed that certain schools in the US were allowing students to identify as cats and insist that supply teachers meow at them instead of speak, of course. And this was based on a TikTok video from a supply teacher, and the rumor grew to she got fired for not meowing at a kid. Even she said she didn't get fired. So the story grew, but also anybody who is in a school that griefs supply teachers knows that was griefing a supply teacher. Kids do what they think they can get away with. I mean, one of the most glorious trolls I've ever seen in a science class is a student. I won't name her name now because she's kind of a big deal. But she deadpanned insisted that one of our science teachers explained why we farted and why it stunk. And the teacher was pretty cool. He said, "If you really care about this, see me after class." And everybody just sort of laughed, and respect was earned because he knew she was trolling and was good-natured about it, but didn't. Kids test, right? Kids test. I actually got in trouble once because I used to do things teaching kids how to make no-sew costumes. So, you know, Minimal scissor work so they don't cut themselves. Don't want kids using sharp needles, all that stuff. So here's some really easy costumes you can make not knowing how to sew. And one of the easiest things in the world were cat ears. And a teacher, a parent actually was hopping mad, complained to the school because his daughter wouldn't take off the cat ears for weeks after she made them. Nowadays, that would be considered indoctrination of children. No, it was a costume, and the kid liked it because she made it herself. And she was proud that she made something, but adult freaked out and tries to program child like little machines instead of recognizing that that child is a person with hopes and dreams and fears. But this story went everywhere. And my friend picked up on it, and the first time I heard about it was him saying, with a straight face, this happened. And I'm like, this sounds strange. So I looked it up. And that's how I know about it. There's a more serious version of this one that people believe that a man in BC was sent to prison for misgendering his child as part of a court case, a custody battle. It is not true, but at least once a week, I have to refute this story. It is not true. The reason he was sent to prison for 6 months is because he violated gag orders on a trial and disclosed his child's private medical information against the orders of the court. Very different thing, right? It had nothing to do with pronouns. It had nothing to do with pronouns and everything to do when a judge tells you not to do something and you do it, you go to jail. If you do it brazenly enough, you get a couple of warnings. This guy wouldn't stop. That's the truth. But this is the problem. We call it fake news. But maybe we should start calling what it really is, media gaslighting. Because this is so all-pervasive now that I really do see an erosion of people being able to judge whether something seems plausible or not. And when we get into private situations, when we get into situations where trust could be violated, when we get into situations where abuse is possible, it's very important that people be able to tell the difference between blue and red, up, down, black, white. But that's really hard to do when every day of your life you're being told, don't believe your common sense, your eyes and ears, believe me, right? Because I know the right words, or I'm on the moral high ground. If you don't do this, you're a groomer. If you don't do this, you're a transphobe. No. You guys have seen me call both of these extremes out for cut it out. No, they're not. You know they're not. You're just trying to shut these people up and get them to do what you want. It's abuse in plain sight. And people defend it because, oh, well, it happened this one time. I don't care. I don't care if one Virginia school board had one article citing critical race theory on its website. You don't knowingly falsely accuse someone of endangering a child. You don't. That's a low blow. Similarly, you don't accuse someone of having hatred in their heart because they misspeak. And I've realized, because I'm like, you guys know, I am baffled by the way people talk to each other. Not just on the internet. If it was just on the internet, it'd be this is just the internet. But I see people talking to this way in meat space too. People are not as different offline as they are online. Isn't it funny that I refer to it as a default state, eh? But, that was very Canadian. But, it's not just people being blowhards on the internet anymore. It's people treating everything like a goddamn protest. Pardon the GD. I try to avoid that. I got excited there. The idea that you should walk out of your job because you don't like the politics that the company is practicing, instead of having a discussion and trying to work it out before you walk out. That's the first thing you do, instead of an extreme measure after everything else has failed. That's not right. That's mob rule. That's not, differences of opinion in that regard are not what that sort of collective action was designed to work against. Similarly, if you have a problem with something someone else in your newsroom said, you have the ability to use your platform to refute it. You don't demand that the newspaper pull it down. There are, the radio station that carries It's Not Therapy, they have some conservative programming on it, like very conservative programming. I don't agree. I don't like some of their opinions. I happen to respect the guy who does the show a lot, but I don't like the opinions of a lot of the guests he has on. But free speech. Are they doing anything illegal? No, I don't have to like it. And this is not, we treat this as a free speech issue, but let's face it. This is also an issue of, how do I put this? If it is normalized that people can just bully other people into maybe not changing their minds about something, but certainly shutting up about what they believe, we got a real problem, right? Because what social market force, if you will, stops that? That's highly effective. That means the very vocal, strong minority controls the majority, right? And nobody can do anything about it. Might is right. It's George Orwell, right? And I mean, Orwell didn't create that idea. That was basically the problem with Athenian direct democracy, and why France and the US have so many complications in their governments, because it's like no direct democracy descends into mob rule and ostracism. And I mean, the state of Athens could strip someone of their citizenship for being sufficiently unpopular. Can you imagine that? But that's basically what we're back to, right? That's what cancellation is. It's social ostracism. It's stripping someone of their social personhood because they have transgressed. Not necessarily morally, not beyond a particular standard of proof, but it's, Oscar Wilde's A Portrait of Dorian Gray, where the accusation of a bad thing is a greater transgression than actually doing the bad thing, because all the hoity-toity nobleman has to say in face of an accusation is, you go too far, sir, and that is the greater social transgression. Oh, you weren't civil, you weren't polite. Well, it doesn't matter that he's 100% right. Yeah, I did murder a guy. You accuse, that's wrong. This is the world we live in. We live in the world George Orwell used. We live in the world Oscar Wilde wrote about. People talk about The Handmaid's Tale and all this stuff. These sorts of things are far more insidious. Aldous Huxley's Soma, right? The idea that you can program young people using the right think media instead of the wrong think media. The fact that we have to protect people's minds from, fascism or woke ideology or all this. This is all a form of gaslighting. This is all, don't think. Don't come to your own conclusions. We're going to do the thinking for you. Don't believe your eyes and ears, believe us. And again, if people believe stupid things in the media, is it really that important? No, not on its own. But you get into those situations where it is really important to recognize the early warning signs of somebody who is potentially abusive. It doesn't start with a big action, to not invoke the thing again. It doesn't work. Everything's great. And then one day he smacked me across the face. That's not how it works. It starts with little things, seeing the seeds of doubt. And sometimes, that's where we get into coercive control, right? There doesn't even need to be outright violence. You really, really smart abusers don't go there. Because you go there, well, that can be proven. All this other stuff, it's their word against yours. The really, really good abusers, the people who really screw someone up, are the ones that don't get violent, are the ones that just twist your brain. They twist your sense of self. They twist your proportions. They twist your perspective. And they pull stuff like, you're annoying, you're irritating, no one likes you, no one wants to work with you, you're not a team player. All these really subjective things that conjure up this big group of people. And people have this natural inclination to, oh my God, people are talking about me. People are just not telling me. Oh my God. Right? We're social animals. Remember I said on Monday, we're wired for cooperation. People don't want to be thought ill of. And so they may consciously go, oh, they're just saying that, there's no proof. But let's face it, who hasn't curbed their behavior even just a little, just in case, right? It's very important that we see certain tactics as, if not inherently wrong, serious red flags. And when anybody is trying to tell you that they know more than they do about what you intended, not what you said, not how it came across, but what you intended, that's don't believe your eyes and ears, believe me. Don't believe your own judgment. You don't know what you're doing, believe me. It's insidious, and it leaves people very, very vulnerable to some very bad stuff. And that's part of the reason you see such, horrific abuse in marginalized communities, because there are already people in the 90s, it was realizing you weren't straight, but people go through a lot of self-doubt there. So they're vulnerable to people who do not have their best interests at heart, right? Now it's, the shocking rate of violence against trans people. Well, because these are people that are already in a position where they can't take anything for granted. They have so much doubt. And if they come across somebody who is preying on that, they can get into situations that they can't get out of. And I would think, the conservative media doesn't really have the burden here, right? The progressive media does. The progressive media is the one that, the conservatives kind of do the grooming children thing. They've stepped into this. We want to protect natal women. Okay, I take it back. The conservatives now have a moral burden too, because they're pulling this shit. All right. You want to protect people. You truly want to protect victims. Well, then your conduct matters. When you're engaging in knowingly duplicitous, knowingly gaslighty stuff, like you must believe women, even if she lied. The number of Amber Heard defense pieces that contain the phrase, even if she lied. What? No, if she lied, she lied. If she lied, he didn't do it. But, she lied because he didn't. No, that's not the way it works. It's credibility. It's one thing to not remember. It's one thing for your memory to be different. A lot of victims get caught up in the way trauma affects the brain. You can't remember things clearly, and you're really embarrassed that you can't remember things clearly. So your brain fills in these blanks. And so little things about the story change, but there's a difference between one of those. You don't expect an unrehearsed story to be completely consistent. There's little things, there are little things about that aren't sure. You know, it was around 12 is different than it was 12:05. You sure it was 12:05? Yes, it was 12:05. If somebody says it was around 12 and then they say, well, maybe it was 1, they're not expressing certainty. When someone said it was 12:05 and then later on they say it was 11:02, that's a change. Do you see the difference? These things matter, right? It matters. And for people to be trying to sell, even if she lied, you still have to believe her because this greater movement. No, I completely disagree. Because if we truly believe, if we truly want to protect victims, and I very much do, I very much want to cut down on the amount of abusive behavior that happens to everyone. And that means workplace abuse, that means intimate partner violence, that means, emotional abuse, that means, abuse of people via economics, just let's create a less abusive world. Not even a kinder world, just a less abusive world, please. In order to do that, we can't just go, even if she lied, we have to support her, because any bad actor is going to go, I now see a system that can be exploited here. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, I know what to do. And okay, it might not be a pretty blonde white woman next time. It might be someone else. And then, all of a sudden, oh no, well, there's credibility issues here, right? It's for some odd reason, people don't want to believe that really attractive people in that particular way that Amber Heard is sort of angelically attractive, right? People don't want to believe that there could be nefarious intent there because, she's so pretty. She's like an angel. Look, Mr. Bubbles, I don't know why people feel that way. I think maybe a lot of people see themselves in her and therefore are seeing things that aren't there. But you cannot claim to advocate for victims and then go, even if she lied. Because if she lied about being a victim, she wasn't a victim. And no movement is helped by giving bad actors a how-to guide to go, this is how you exploit these things. It's the same way the whole sort of abusive American executive, right? There's a playbook. There's a reason these guys are cut from a particular cloth. They watch what works for someone else. They learn the failings of the system and they exploit that, right? There's a reason so many of these guys sound so damn similar, right? It's not because, it's not because they're identical. It's because the same tactics work. So, it is possible to say, no, most women lie, but most women don't lie. Sorry. Most women don't lie. This one clearly got caught in one, right? The same way, most men don't do horrendously horrific things, but Harvey Weinstein's guilty as sin. Come on, right? He claimed, it was all consensual. BS. If one more guy claims that violent sex was consensual when he was the aggressor and he says it was consensual, like that's another form of gaslighting. Anybody who is into BDSM goes, that is not the way it works. If they're saying they weren't into it, dude. Practice aftercare. That's the whole purpose of aftercare, to make sure the person's okay. Because a big part, I am showing way too much understanding of BDSM here. I know a lot of very interesting people, but the intensity of the experience means you have to check in on people afterwards. There has to be that closeness and the connection, so that the intense experience feels safe. That's why it's fun. If that's not there, then it's not a positive submissive experience. It's abuse. That's the difference. And, people who know about this stuff know whenever they say, oh, it was consensual, they're not denying the violence. They're just saying he was into it or she was into it. Big red flag. I'm sorry. If you don't like hearing it, I apologize. I know it might be tough because you fell for it. You believed it in the past, but there's a reason that they caution. I covered a few BDSM conventions, okay? And they really caution people that you are not legally protected if somebody decides later that they weren't into it. We joke about consent contracts and all that stuff, but that various courts around the world have indicated that even those don't really mean anything because those could have been signed under duress. The idea of understanding consent and the idea that it's ongoing is not just to protect victims. It's to protect people who like playing dom or who are in relationships where they have been in that position. It's very, very important that you know what your exposure is, because anybody, who is really into BDSM knows that being a dom is kind of a vulnerable position. Because, you got to be careful not to go too far. You got to be careful to check in, but then you got to make it good, right? You got to sell it. I scared people at a LARP convention once because I was playing a succubus. I was in a black PVC bat bustier and really tall boots. And it's like, all right, you want me to play demon succubus? I love my demon succubus, but this was not a nice succubus like Beelzebub. This was full on rip and tear until it is done succubus. And apparently I scared the shit out of some people who apparently didn't know it was an act. But that's the risk you take, right? That's why I say it's vulnerable, right? And there are certain areas, it's difficult to be, I shouldn't say it's difficult. I've had to adapt my crowd control tactics as a performer, now understanding that certain people really don't like to be touched, especially at cons. In a regular show, if you're just doing like regular theater, you put your hand on someone's shoulder to control the space. Part of it is staging, right? You want to make sure the person's on stage in the right place. But if you're at a convention where there's a high rate of autism, you can't do that. I found that out the hard way. But I care, right? I change my approach because I'm not gaslighting people to say, oh, you're being too sensitive. Oh, come on, toughen up. So on and so forth. No. People have the right to bodily integrity. I was the one that needed to learn there, not them. That's the way it works. All right. If you like this, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching this really long Wellness Wednesday, and be well.